I promise you will cry by the end of this. There once was a blind girl who hated herself just because she was blind. She hated everyone except her loving boyfriend. She said that if she could see the world, she would marry him. But one day, someone donated her a pair of eyes and she began to see again, including her boyfriend. So her boyfriend asked her, "Now that you can see the world, will you marry me?" But the girl was shocked to find out that her boyfriend was blind too, and she refused to marry him. Her boyfriend walked away in tears and later wrote a letter saying, "Just take care of my eyes, dear. I love you."
This is the worst way you can possibly die. If you lived in ancient Persia and committed a crime, you'd be sentenced to the worst death in all of history. First, you'd be put in a swamp naked, trapped between two boats. Your head would be exposed and your hands and feet would be in the water. Then someone would force feed you milk and honey and cover your entire body in it. This would attract flies, rats, wild animals, and especially bees to come feast on your exposed body. But this isn't how you die. It gets so much worse because you're being fed this honey for days at a time. This leads to diarrhea, so they gotta do number 2 inside the boat. After a few days, maggots start growing in it and begin eating the victim, so they'd be eaten alive from the inside. This boy got a pencil stuck in his ear, but what doctors pull out will haunt you. Kindergartner Louis was doodling on the first day of class last semester, but his friend interrupted him and bet him $5 that he wouldn't break his pencil and shove it all the way into his ear. But Louis wasn't one to back down, so he forced the pencil 4 inches into his ear canal. But later that class, Louis felt a strange sensation in his left ear. He began hallucinating heavily and collapsed to the floor. He was rushed to the hospital just barely conscious. Doctors immediately removed the pencil from his ear, but noticed something was wrong. As they took a closer look inside, they could see something moving. Before I tell you, I found a way that you can go live even if you have under 1,000 followers. Links to my bio if you want to try too. Doctors found a live cockroach that had been living in his ear for weeks.
The most respectful moments in sports history. During a tennis match, this tennis player severely hurt his ankle. So his opponent immediately rushed over to make sure he was okay, and then carried him to the nearest medical team. During a 10-kilometer race, this runner's body completely gave out. So a fellow racer picked him up and carried him across the finish line. And because of this heartwarming moment, politicians from Nigeria gave the man $10,000 for helping him. During a soccer match, this soccer player's religious head cover came off. So the players from the opposite team helped cover her until she could get it back on, showing a great moment of respect. The luckiest moments ever caught on camera. This baby rolled onto the train tracks, so this man risked his own life to save the baby from certain death. He manages to escape just in the nick of time. During a baseball interview, this baseball player manages to catch the ball right before hitting the reporter's head. Watch closely as this worker pushes this man out of the way from a train that was about to run him over. This car was about to hit this kid, but one man pulls him out of the way just in the nick of time. And this skier barely misses a drone that was falling out of the sky. A man noticed that his dog watched him sleep every night, then he realizes the heartbreaking truth. Part 2. So after the owners took the dog to the vet and the doctor said he was healthy, he said one last goodbye and then drove to the animal shelter to return him. When he got to the shelter, he asked the staff why he wasn't sleeping, and what she told him was so devastating that it broke his heart. Before I continue, I found this super cool app where you can expose all your friends by changing their text messages. Links in my bio if you want to try it too. So it turns out the previous owners abandoned the dog. However, the previous owner couldn't bear to see the dog's face as he walked away forever. So he waited for the dog to fall asleep, and when he woke up, he was in a shelter. This explains why the dog wouldn't go to sleep. He was afraid of his new owner leaving him. So that night, the owner removed the gate and let the dog sleep with him, hoping it would fix his worries. And the dog ended up gaining his trust, and now he can sleep peacefully again. This story will break your heart. There was a young girl who had an argument with her dad. She wanted to go to a party, but her dad didn't let her. So she decided to sneak out anyways. At the party, she met a guy who was a few years older than her. He asked her if she wanted to go to another party nearby, and she happily accepted. But as they left to go to his car, the man stumbled. She noticed he was drunk, but decided to get in anyways. Speeding down the highway, the man put his arm around her and didn't seem to be paying much attention to the road. Suddenly, she was blinded by headlights and screamed in terror before everything went blank. When she woke up in the hospital, she began to cry because she couldn't feel her arms or legs. She begged the nurse to deliver a message to her dad saying that she was so sorry and that she loves him. The nurse immediately left the room and broke down in tears because she couldn't tell her that the other person who died in the crash was actually her dad. This man was frozen in ice for 3 days and you won't believe what happened to him. His name is David Blaine and he went inside a block of ice for 3 days with no food and only one tube supplying him with air and water. At the 61-hour mark, he was beginning to lose consciousness, but he couldn't go to sleep because if he leaned on the ice, he would have got severe frostbite. Unfortunately, this led him to have extreme hallucinations. Near the end of the stunt, he called his girlfriend over, but she was immediately pulled away. This made him think that he was dead and that she couldn't see him. After 63 hours, they decided to cut him out, but they said he was so delusional that he tried to grab the chainsaw. He finally made it out, but he was so physically and emotionally tired that he couldn't walk or talk. David was rushed to the hospital in critical condition, but you won't believe what he did next, like for part 2.
Here's the truth behind Doc McStuffin. Doc McStuffin was born with a rare disease that doctors later found out was brain cancer. Doctors gave her countless medications and treatments to keep her alive for 7 years, but she eventually fell into a coma. In her dreams, she talks to toys and makes friends with them. She imagines herself as a heroic doctor who can save all these toys, because deep down she knows the doctors in her real life will never be able to save her. This boy called 911 on his own parents, but what cops find in his room will shock you. It was a regular shift for 911 operator Sarah Thompson when she received a call from what sounded like a toddler. She could barely make out what the boy was saying, but knew something wasn't right. She could hear dogs barking and people screaming and breaking things in the background while the toddler cried for help. They kept him on the line just long enough to track his location before a loud bang went off and the line went dead. Being a trained police officer, Sarah suited up and joined the squad that rushed over to where the call was traced. It led them from what appeared to be an abandoned house in the middle of the forest, and it was eerily silent. The team broke down the door to find glass everywhere. Sarah noticed a dirty rope lining the entire floor of the house, so she followed it down to the basement where it was pitch black. She noticed some lines in the floorboards which appeared to be a trap door, but no amount of training could prepare her for what she was about to see next, like for part 2. This boy called 911 on his own parents, but what cops find in his room will shock you. Part 2. Sarah opened the trap door and found the boy drowning in a pool of water with his wrist tied. She immediately dived in and pulled out the boy. He appeared to be okay, but seconds later he began hyperventilating. They rushed him to the hospital in critical condition, but when they arrived at the ER, his heart stopped. Before I tell you, I found this app where you can expose your friends by changing their text messages. The link's in my bio, but don't tell anyone. Doctors were thankfully able to revive the boy, whose name is Tyler. Turns out his dad had killed his own mother, and with Tyler being the only witness, he tried to get rid of him too. Days later, he was caught and sent to prison for life. Sarah ended up adopting Tyler, and the two are still together to this day. This guy is the most hated man in the NFL, and here's why. His name is Dion Rich, and he is a charmer. He got his start by breaking into high-profile parties where he met celebrities. Eventually, he became friends with people like Bill Clinton and a ton of other celebrity athletes. Before Super Bowl I, he found out where the team bus was dropping off the Kansas City Chiefs. All he had to do was get there before them, put on a team jacket, and walk right in. After that, he was hooked and began sneaking into every Super Bowl using disguises. That is until NFL executives noticed pictures of him at every Super Bowl, and they were so pissed. So they actually hired detectives to try to find him at every game. But a decade later at Super Bowl 12, he did it again when a Denver Broncos player he was friends with led him onto the field. However, it looked like the Cowboys were going to win, so he walked over to their side. And when the Cowboys won, someone snapped this picture of Dion Rich carrying the head coach.
This girl felt an intense pain in her eye, and you won't believe what the doctor pulled out. The story began in 2019 when 16-year-old Alexa woke up with extreme pain in her left eye. She thought she was just having a really bad migraine, so she took some Advil and went to school like normal. But when she got to school, the pain was so severe that she collapsed to the floor. When her teacher found her, he called an ambulance and she was rushed to the hospital. When she got to the hospital, the doctor examined her eyeball and saw something moving around under her eyelid. But before I tell you, I found this app that can edit your videos so you can get TikTok famous. Links in my bio if you want to get famous too. The doctor saw 2 tiny legs sticking out of her eyelid, so he rushed her to the operating table. He managed to pull out 4 bees that were living inside her eye socket and feeding off her tears.